So my name is Haley Chute. I run product and marketing at a company called Octagos. My background has been a lot in cardiology. I was in marketing and product. I've got an engineering background by training. Um, but this is the first sort of AI experience that I have had, but also is in our space. And so that's what makes the company that I work for so unique. We're in the cardiac remote monitoring space. So we help bring in all of the disparate data sources for cardiac data into a single platform and help clinicians and their care teams prioritize patients and get the right folks the care that they need at the time that they need it.
No, that's wonderful, Haley. And Philip, over to you.
Thanks, Jerry. Great to be back with the Hit Lab group here as well. I am Philip. You can call me Phil if you would like. I am with Subsalt. We are a compliance infrastructure tool that is utilized by health systems primarily for accelerating medical research and AI deployments. I've been in healthcare several years now. I lead our entire healthcare vertical, but I've primarily had a background in technology, in startups, and new innovative ways of changing the way that things have been done for a number of different years.
Right. And Phil, since you're on the virtual mic, I'll go to you very quickly first. And, around the importance of operationalizing access to healthcare data, from your perspective, what are the biggest sort of infrastructure barriers that are preventing healthcare organizations from actually, fully realizing or fully leveraging AI today?
Yeah, Jerry, it's interesting because the biggest barrier isn't actually the technology itself anymore. The movement and the pace with which things have changed, even in the last few months, I think everybody's probably aware. The biggest barrier is actually healthcare organizations, is the way that they handle access to their own data for those AI tools, right? The process today was built for what was a slower world. For many decades, for a long time, getting access to that clinical data, your PHI for these tools. For example, a researcher might write up their submission for a grant, then they have to send it over to the IRB. It has to go through privacy, legal, DUAs, BAAs, and then 6 to 18 months later, right, they get the data that they wanted initially. It might not be exactly what they needed, so they have to go back through a lot of that process, but it's slow. It worked because humans were the ones who were asking for that data, right? AI doesn't necessarily just ask for data that one time. You point AI at a question that you're, seeking about readmissions, for example, and it'll run 100 different queries to get the answer, and it will continue to iterate as it goes. So the number of requests goes from hundreds a year that were coming down the pike to hundreds a minute. And you can't hire your way out of that. You can't add more people. You can't add more process. And you start to create a massive bottleneck that has existed in one way, shape, or form, but is now going to become completely untenable when you think about adopting AI and scaling it across a healthcare organization, right? Case in point, I was talking to a researcher at a prominent Midwestern academic medical center the other week, and he was able to reduce the time it took him to build and finish an epidemiological analysis from 28 days to 14 minutes using Claude Code. So completely condensing the time it took him to finish the analysis. But then he told me it took him 5 months to get access to the data he needed to actually do it. So that real barrier is fully leveraging AI. The biggest challenge is upstream, right? That access to the data that was built for human levels of requests and not necessarily machine levels.
Yeah. No, wow, that's a great example to start with. I think there, Phil, and I'd like to bring you in here, Haley, especially since I think you mentioned earlier around the work that you guys are doing at Octagos, and your team recently launched a conversational AI
We
capability
did.
that allows
Yeah.
clinicians and health systems to interact with their data in plain language. Again, sort of that access piece that Phil was just talking about. How do you see natural sort of language interfaces changing how healthcare teams are able to access and use that clinical data? Sort of piggybacking off
Sure.
Phil's
Yeah.
comment.
Yeah. We're very excited about this. I think honestly it goes to sort of what Phil was talking about is like the access is has been built for different ways of getting data. This natural language querying that we are allowing for now is the first interface that actually matches how clinicians think, right? They ask questions. They don't think in SQL, or at least I personally don't think in SQL queries. And so we're really setting this up in a way that people can ask questions and get real answers in the way that they're already thinking. And that's what makes this unique to us and certainly in our space. But also, I think we'll see a lot more of this as we go forward, where health becomes more accessible, not only for patients, as we're seeing, as they have more access to their data, but even to the teams who need the answers, right? It's buried in their data, it exists, but getting to that has oftentimes taken teams of researchers, 28 days to get this kind of information. This doesn't require a report writer, clinical researcher, an analyst, et cetera. We can just ask questions of their data. And so that's what we built. We launched it actually earlier this week. So really exciting about that. I think the other thing that's really important about this, and I think it sort of speaks to what Phil is discussing and the challenges that they're helping solve, is that data has historically been gated behind whoever can write the query. Whether when the interface is in plain language, the clinical team, the billing team, the administrators, like everyone has access to that same data, and the same data, like from the same data source too, right? So like it's all the same data in the same source that a single team can access in different ways depending on their role. We talk about democratization, or at least the word has sort of lost favor recently. But I feel like when I think about what this offers, it is democratization of data access to teams, which I think, we're certainly seeing good reception for that as well. And so, excited to see what questions people ask of their data and sort of how others take on this type of model in their healthcare solutions.
No, absolutely. And Haley, to keep you on the virtual mic here, I think
Sure.
is either you or Phil mentioned earlier around sort of the human in the loop piece around these different AI systems, and AI, especially autonomous AI systems have continued to grow and develop, and there's been this sort of growing divide between the growth of these AI systems, in their autonomous settings and the human loop models in healthcare. Can you talk about sort of the importance around maintaining the human oversight, especially in the clinical settings?
Totally, totally. And I think this was a really big theme also coming out of HIT Lab in New York a couple of weeks ago, was sort of seeing those who are talking about this autonomous AI concept and the human in the loop. And I think there's definitely space for both. But what we come from is certainly the human in the loop model, as I spoke about on the stage, and happy to share a little bit more about. I do think, though, that when we try to decide where these things diverge, what we're really thinking about is calibration of the importance of questions that need to be answered. So, the real question is where the model's confidence is calibrated, right? And where the consequences lie. So in cardiac monitoring, where we sit, a missed episode, it has real consequences. Now, this isn't like a UX problem, right? And so for us, it's a real patient, right? And so, and we know models are extraordinarily good at pattern recognition, but they don't carry liability. They also don't know the patient's social context, right? They don't know what they don't even know. And so, we are very clear to make sure that humans stay in the loop when we provide information to our clinicians and their care teams. And I think that that'll probably continue in cardiac. I don't see that changing. It certainly doesn't look like it's going to change for us anytime soon. I would say it's also important, like human insight is not a brake on AI. I don't think it's like going fast with autonomous and going slow with human in the loop. I think that in some ways, the mechanism of maintaining human in the loop actually allows us to move faster with AI, because we can have it involved in more problem sets that you wouldn't really be able to do if humans weren't in the loop. And quite frankly, in the way that we see it, when a clinician reviews and signs, they're doing like three things at once, right? They're catching the edge cases of the model, they're generating feedback that can be incorporated into the next version of these things, and they're also, quite frankly, they're providing the clinical context and ultimately the accountability as well that the system just can't doing. And so removing them, you don't necessarily get a faster system, you get like a fragile one, quite frankly. And we've seen in our data that adding these humans, they've always been there. Making sure that humans stay in the loop is what provides for us a high degree of accuracy, specificity, sensitivity, all the things that we look at when we're doing publications. That without either one, you lose that, right? Without the AI to pull in the context, AI doesn't get tired, right? AI can work in the middle of the night. Pulling in all the context and then having a human layer over and say, like, this is important to pay attention to, and this is not. This is where we really get like the good stuff out of, where nothing is missed. It's the best solution possible in our space, especially a space like ours that has, we're not with a lack of data. It's just a matter of making that data accessible and timely and accurate. So if I answered your question there.
No,
I don't know, Philip,
no.
if you have a similar thought on human in the loop versus autonomous. I mean, we're in slightly different spaces, but I think we're sort of seeing these divergences across different types of technologies.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was just going to layer on there. I think AI is probably not at a spot just yet where it can accept the, trust me, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, like somebody who's been wise, I've been down this path 100 times. Oh yeah, trust me, I got it covered. Right. I think when you start to say that, like, oh, the model's got it, like, don't worry about it, trust us. That's when, legal can't defend it. The
Totally.
board's not going to sign off on it. And so you end up in a situation where you're going to erode that trust faster than you were ever trying to build it. And the second that happens, things start to fall apart pretty quick.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what we have found is the most successful is like to use AI to do like the 80% of the work that like is prep work, right? Like drafting notes, surfacing findings, et cetera. Like humans should be making the decisions about a patient's care. And so in that case, that's why we're so keen on that, on that paradigm. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just Jerry, I know we have like a minute or two here, but the other piece of that and where we spend a lot of our time focusing is outside of the clinical workforce. I don't want any cardiac AI model necessarily making a autonomous decision about my cardiac health, ever for that matter. But there are many use cases that exist within a hospital system, right, where you don't necessarily need PHI. And so what we've come across is several different health systems who have taken a no PHI for AI stance on several different use cases, a multitude of use cases outside the clinical workflow, because number one, it's faster. And number two, you're also guaranteeing that you're protecting patient privacy in a world where it's not necessary to use it, right? So you accelerate your time to outcome. And you also are safe from a legal perspective as well as from a patient privacy perspective. And so I think that's likely the path that health systems will continue to go down, to where if we don't need to use it, then why risk it at all? But certainly for cardiac models, I would prefer that not to be the case.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Absolutely. Yeah, and if we could just take the last sort of 60 seconds, both of you, and just sort of speak to, since a lot of your work is very much in collaboration with health systems and physicians, what is it that healthcare organizations need to get right over the next sort of 2 to 3 to 4 years to make sure that AI, in whatever format we're looking at it in, is delivering these measurable clinical impacts rather than just like the hype that's coming with it.
Yeah. Do you want to take that first, Phil?
You can go for it.
Okay. Well, let's build on this together. So I think it's really important to remember that this AI is using data, and right? But the data layer is the most important part. And so making sure that the data is as good as it can be. And I'm thinking of like fragmented EHR systems, inconsistent device data, all that kind of stuff is just going to create junk. And so making sure that you don't just focus on implementing AI in your systems, whether that's for efficiency gains or for clinical reasons, we need to make sure that this is clean data that these models are working on. So I think that's like a number one thing that we need to focus on. I'll also add another one, which is that it's about the workflow and the outcomes and not necessarily adoption. So make sure that as you bring these into your these solutions into your system, that you're looking at outcomes that matter. So like time to actionable findings, clinical significant events, not just my staff is using AI, because that is a vanity metric, if we're being honest, not necessarily like something that's adding value. I'll pass it to you since we don't have so much time.
I totally agree on that last point there, right? In terms of like vanity metrics, if you've got 95% of the hospitals using Copilot, I wouldn't necessarily say that you have like fully adopted AI within the healthcare system.
Yeah.
And so stop treating, a lot of this like a one-off project and start treating it like a system that needs to be scaled and is going to continue to scale. And so you need the infrastructure in place to do that. Right now, it's like every single AI project starts from scratch, fresh request to get access to the right data that you need, the right teams in place, which doesn't scale, right? That hasn't worked for a number of different technologies, and it's not going to work for AI. And so having the right infrastructure, the right foundation in place is what allows you to scale and to implement and to drive patient outcomes, like the goal of which AI is and should be for the healthcare industry.
Love it. I agree.
Amazing, energetic end to our conversation there, Phil and Haley. But it doesn't have to end there. I encourage everybody in the audience certainly to connect with Phil and Haley. We put their LinkedIn's into the chat, and certainly carry on this really important and energy-driven conversation around AI, human in the loop, and where that's going. So thank you both of you for coming on the program. Wonderful to have you at the summit as well. Yeah, look forward to seeing you at more HitLab events in the future.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Haley.